All right, Ty, I think we're live. It would be awesome if we were live. We'll see if yeah, there we are.
Hello, there we are. Well, welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. This is sort of an emerger pod, if you will.
Yeah.
So look, this story really escalated quickly. It was only a few days ago that we saw reports starting to break that the Houston Chronicle was saying Texas and Oklahoma were kicking the tires.
Yes.
Whether or not they were going to leave the Big 12, if they could go on over to the SEC. This, of course, was met with all sorts of different response around college football. As it were, the story has escalated quickly. I'm looking at a report now on Horns 24/7. I've seen reports elsewhere. Our friend Kirk Bowles from the Austin American Statesman, people saying this is virtually a done deal at this point.
Wow.
That in effect, Texas and Oklahoma are going to announce their intentions to leave the Big 12 as soon as 2025, as soon as I have here in air quotes, which we can talk about momentarily. As soon as 2025, at least when the rights deal expires, they would at that point then head on over to the SEC. This has, of course, triggered an incredible chain reaction where just not too long ago, I saw on our Twitter feed rumors of Kansas talking to the Big Ten. Here we are again. Conference realignment. It seems it kind of came out of left field, Dan. And I know we're waiting. Perhaps Andy Staples, our friend from The Athletic, is going to join us. We've extended an invite to him. Lord knows it's a busy day for him as well. So what's your reaction to all this?
Oh, man. The initial reaction is that it's a bummer on a certain level, but that I understand. Oh, there's Andy. Here we go.
Here I am.
Andy. There's Andy.
There he is. What's up?
Okay. I was just talking about how Andy, welcome to the show.
We're live.
Staples. We're live. We're live. So don't say anything that will get you in trouble legally. Don't get fired.
We'll do it live.
So it's just initial reactions at this point. So I'm saying it's a bit of a bummer because anytime you consolidate a universe, that it's fun when everything is sort of separated and cool. My initial reaction is like, okay, this takes away charm, but I don't know if we're in the business of college football for charm anymore. So that was my initial reaction, but on a certain level, I understand it from financial perspectives, from somewhat competitive and ego perspectives. Andy, the floor is yours. I guess let's start here. Why is this all happening?
Well, because I think Texas and Oklahoma looked around and, we got to figure out when exactly this happened. We've heard a lot of different things, but I think we can very safely say it's been going on for a while, maybe even before the pandemic. So what was, I still haven't nailed down an inciting incident that what said to Texas or to Oklahoma, hey, you need to get out of there.
Right.
But yeah. I do wonder, ESPN throwing a lot of money at the SEC for that CBS package in the middle of a pandemic. If they weren't already ready to go, that would have cinched it for me. That would have said, okay, they treat these guys differently than we get treated. We need to be treated like that because we are that level of brand. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma are the level of brand of Alabama and Auburn and Florida and LSU and Texas A&M. So they want to be treated that way too. And I don't blame them for that.
So it's a money thing. It's an ego thing, wanting to be treated in a certain way. The outstanding questions are pretty vast about like, what does this mean TV wise? What does this mean for the Big 12? What does this mean for the SEC? What does this mean for the rest of college football? Are we on the scale of full-on national reverberations, or as I like to call it, pre-alignment?
Do I need to call the reverb line to leave this?
Yes.
Which, by the way, I'm completely stealing that concept for my podcast.
You wouldn't be the first.
Year.
You would not be the first.
We need fans just crying into their phones. We all need that. So, but no, this has to do that. That's the part I can't figure out is exactly who does what. You've seen a report where Kansas is trying to set up something with the Big Ten, which obviously, I mean, shoot. Yeah, I want to get in the Big Ten too. That's not exactly any port in a storm. Like that's where you want to be. If you can't get in the SEC, you want to go to the Big Ten. And I would imagine that the other people left behind in the Big 12 are thinking this along the same lines. But also, if you're the Big Ten, you're looking at this and going, okay, the SEC has essentially created its own planet. Now, what do we do? Because the Big Ten is the only league capable of even competing with the SEC now in terms of influence, eyeballs, everything else. Like, and there's a weird dynamic at play here. Where if you think, like, if I'm Fox, I'm looking at this like I'm going to try to get all of the Big Ten instead of the Big Ten going to ESPN and Fox, so that I can differentiate I say we are the Big Ten's network. We have Big Ten football, and ESPN will say we have SEC football. And I hate to say it, we're getting close to Demolition Man territory. The all restaurants are Taco Bell. Like it's getting there. Like, because that's the thing you kind of worry about is the SEC and the Big Ten. Man, Ty, love that. Big Sandy Bullock fan, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Always. Anytime you go there, yeah. Just wasn't expecting it. Now, unlike
listen,
this news,
we can talk about Demolition Man all day if you want.
Sure. Continue.
No, what I was saying is, it may be that the SEC and the Big Ten, over a period of years now, become the only two places to get premium college football. I mean, that's what you're talking about. Because if you're in the ACC and you're sitting here looking at your TV deal that lasts until 2036, you're like, wait a second. We're not like them.
Right.
We can't become like them because there's not enough brands to take to become like them.
Right.
They already got them.
So here's my question. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could approach this, but let's stay with the Texas and Oklahoma side of this for a second. You're Texas, you're Oklahoma. We don't know the precipitating event that is causing them to explore this. I mean, the skeptic among us, even the non-skeptic among us, would say there's certainly a money component. How soon they can get over? How soon they can get over is subject to a bunch of different things as well. But if you are Texas, if you're Oklahoma, the appeal seems pretty obvious. If you're the SEC, are you structuring it in pods? Like I saw the SEC network had a thing, right? They had a graphic up a couple days ago where they were speculating how they might organize this. Is that the prevailing wisdom at this point?
Well, I mean, the SEC was potentially going to go to pods anyway with the 14-team league. So they were tired of this whole you play certain teams twice every 10 years. Like that had to stop. That had to change. It didn't even feel like you're in the same league at that point.
Right.
I think,
right.
Isn't A&M going to Missouri for the first time since they've been in the league together in football this year? Like this is their 10th year in the league. Like that should not happen. So I think that was probably going to happen one way or the other, but this actually makes it a little bit cleaner where you can do the 4-team pods and basically you play the teams you play every year but you cycle through everybody else
quickly
every 3 years. Yeah. Right. So you are seeing those other teams. So you may not have annual rivalries, but you can have rivalries because you see them frequently.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's obviously one of the secret sauces of the sport is generating bad blood, not like evil blood, but generating storylines between schools. You're like, oh, wow, like Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh are like angry at each other at midfield. Can't wait to see what happens next year. We need that across every conference and every sport. And I mean, that sort of brings me to the more broad point of you're saying the SEC and the Big Ten are, I mean, even further establishing themselves as the go-to conferences for big-time football. What can the ACC, Pac-12, and I suppose whatever shell is left of the Big 12, what can those schools and those conferences do to maximize the big-timiness of their future?
Right. I really don't know. I mean, that's the problem. This is a checkmate feeling, I think, with if you're those other leagues, because there just aren't the brands out there to take. They're not moving. Like nobody, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, they're not leaving the Big Ten. Alabama, Georgia, Florida, LSU, Auburn, they're not leaving the SEC. Like these are the last two. I guess USC really is the other big brand. Oregon and Washington, very successful programs, very passionate fan bases. But being west of the Rockies, I don't know what happens with that. Like if I'm the Big Ten right now, I'm thinking about this.
Yeah.
Like, do
This is
I
all
try to
just
get
top
some of the
head.
Pac? Yeah. Do I try to get some of the Pac-12 to stitch together a more national proposition?
Man. Yeah.
What about what about Notre Dame? Where do they fit in?
They don't have to do anything. The 12-team playoff means they don't have to do anything. They can be independent for as long as they want, which is a killer for the ACC, because the thing that could change everything for them is Notre Dame joins in football, but now they don't need to. So if they're happy with only being the 5 seed and the best they can do is the 5 seed, then they're never going to join a league. They don't need to.
So if you're looking around the landscape, right? So you have the SEC and the Big Ten consolidating power, packaging schools to, I mean, we see news, Kansas and the Big Ten are having a conversation, which does make sense, of course, given Kansas's basketball and overall sports prowess. And they're, I believe, in AAU.
And similarity to Rutgers football.
And similar, there's a familiarity. You got to get that.
Can we make them crossover opponents?
Yeah, I already joked about what that rivalry trophy is going to look like or not look like. The broken shards of something. So what I'm wondering, though, is if it's about consolidating brands and power, suddenly there are attractive, not on the level of FCC and Big Ten programs. There are programs within the American, there are programs within the Big 12, there are programs within the Pac-12, and there are programs within the ACC. And so in a dream scenario, we still have high-level football without the brand power. You have Cincinnati and UCF having big national recent results, though not huge programs. And then you have programs out west. You have TCU, who has had big results. Baylor has big results. You have programs in a state that cares about football in Texas. Mm-hmm. Is this just throwing programs into a hat? Perhaps our American teams, big winners here, because then they are suddenly associating themselves in a scenario with bigger programs, and they are looked at as much bigger than they ever have been.
It just depends. I mean, it's the same as the American taking most of Conference USA.
Right.
10 years
but
ago.
Now we're saying
it's no.
I mean, if we're adding TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State to Cincinnati, UCF, look, it's LA.
Now, here's my question. Who consumes whom?
Right.
In that scenario. I mean, yeah. I'm not joking about that. Like,
no, I think
would the American consume the Big 12? You think the Pac-12 would? I'm saying if you're the American,
right?
Can you go to ESPN and say, what if we got Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, and added them, and we had a 14-team league?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty good league.
That's honestly a really good league. And it's a good league packaging for competitive football with some big fan bases. Part of me just thinks the Big 12 is going to be picked for parts, and some might, form some new conference with the top of the American, and some might add, 4 to the Pac-12, and we just
let me ask you this:
ACC, yeah.
If you're the Pac-12, who do you add out of the Big 12? Who do you want?
You probably want TCU because it's DFW, and that's they've won a Rose Bowl.
Baylor basically is DFW. I mean, it's an hour and 15 minutes, right, and Chip and Joanna and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so you get the HGTV follow. I think those two are an easy Texas footprint for the Pac-12.
Oklahoma State
might feel more in line with some of the American, maybe. Just what
natural rival. Imagine going from being Oklahoma's natural rival to Tulsa's natural rival.
Wow.
Because that's
how
what
much money
that's
has
what that
been
is
poured into that program to become like a nationally viable
national
brand.
thing.
Yeah.
So let's stay trained on the money for a second, Andy. Texas and Oklahoma, from a money standpoint, what's it look like in the short term if they end up leaving in advance? And by the way, this is assuming that the conference doesn't dissolve under the weight of all this.
And that's a big assumption right now.
And that's why the Kansas news, the whatever you want to call it, the rumors about Kansas to the Big Ten, if other schools decide they want to leave sooner, the whole thing could just buckle under, and that would then give Texas, Oklahoma clearance to leave sooner without paying a huge penalty. If they did leave sooner and there were a conference, they would be in line to have some pretty significant penalties, like 9-figure potential penalties, depending how soon they'd want to go. And then I guess the follow-up to that would be, once they get to the SEC, what does that structure look like for them?
Well, I think in terms of getting to the SEC has always been, when you're in the league, you're in the league. You get a full share. And I can't imagine it being any different for these guys. As far as when they'd want to leave, if let's say the Big 12, the remaining schools stay together and they settle it. You know, you go back to Maryland in 2012. I think the rule said they had to pay $52 million. They wound up settling for $31 million, I think, or $33 million, something like that.
31 and change.
So a little more than half. And I think that's probably a pretty good yardstick to figure out. So you basically take, how many years do you have left? What would you owe? And right now we're talking about, I think the last pre-pandemic year, the average payout in the Big Ten was $37.7 million. So let's say you wanted to go to the SEC in 2023. That would be 2 years remaining on your deal. So, you know, maybe $40 million and you're out. Now that's a ton of money, but if you can imagine, you probably make that up in your first 10 years in the SEC. Like you build that into your, or being Texas and Oklahoma, you may have a donor or two that's willing to stroke the check to cover the difference and ease that transition for you. So, I mean, it's not an unworkable situation at all. This is something they can do. Although I think they would prefer that the Big 12 just sort of collapse under its own weight and then they're out.
How much of this is instructed by the playoff going to 12? It feels like most. I guess the playoff going to 12, the Big 12 looking uncertain for the future, and also the financial hits that everybody in the sport took last year. That feels like the Venn diagram.
Well, and also the playoff going to 12, like if there were any doubt in the minds of Texas and Oklahoma, the playoff going to 12 erases that doubt. Because if you're Oklahoma, joining the SEC lowers your chance of making a 4-team college football playoff.
Correct.
In Texas, we don't even need to have that conversation until they get better on the field. But with the 12-team playoff, Oklahoma can be a good SEC team, not necessarily an SEC champ, and get in every year. So I don't think it changes anything for them. And if anything, that was sort of the thing that cinches it for you. Like, oh, we definitely need to go now because the one advantage we had of staying in the Big 12 is going away.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And I just, from a Pac-12 standpoint, because that's where my mind is always going to wander, there's a new commissioner. There's a new person.
George Kliavkoff.
Yes. I think Ty calls him George Clavicle.
We just go Clavicle.
I think that's who Dan Brady may have dated. So in this scenario, the Pac-12 is trying to get into a playoff. It looks like they're going to have an easier road to get into a playoff, but still from a brand perspective, they're behind. Does expanding the Pac-12 by adding whoever, is that a job that needs to now be priority number one for a new commissioner, or should he be waiting for dominoes, or should he be an aggressor?
I think history tells us the aggressive people wind up winning in realignment. And so that would be my suggestion. But I posed the same question that I asked a few minutes ago. Yeah. And unfortunately for George Kliavkoff, he has to answer it for real with real money and real everything else. Who do you take? Because I'm not sure who's there. Now, do you try to get Kansas State and Iowa State and create some like you could create some rivalries with Colorado and Utah if you do that, maybe?
Right.
I mean, you could go to 14 or 16 and do that. I just don't know what fits there. And they're pretty weird about fit there in the Pac-12. That's a thing they talk about quite a bit.
Dan, you brought up a good point about the context for this, the groundwork for this being laid with the 12-team playoff. Does the 12-team playoff still make as much sense if this goes down?
In what way?
Well, I mean, it just seems like so much of the discussion was around there being these Power 5 conferences and everybody having their division winners getting in, and there being some wild cards and a group of 5 getting a chance. But it sort of changes that that calculus at least a little bit, right?
I think
If
you
there
could
are fewer
drop.
conferences, yeah.
You could drop one conference champ out of it. One guaranteed slot for conference champ. You do top 5 ranked conference champs,
Yeah.
and then you could say that the top 5 conference champ. Well, they can't get buys. Only 4 can get buys. So, I mean, the more elegant solution, I guess, there would be, say, top 4 conference champs are guaranteed spots, but then that doesn't help the Pac-12 or any of those. So, yeah, this is sort of the there is no spoon scenario from the Matrix, and I remember writing that column during the last round of realignment. Remember when the Mountain West and Conference USA were going to merge?
Mm-hmm.
I believe Dan Wetzel called it Conference WTF, and I remember listening to the teleconference where the commissioners were explaining that, and Brenton Bonoski, who was the commissioner of Conference USA, somebody asked him about BCS automatic qualifying conference, because this is still back in BCS times, and he goes, "Well, what if there is no BCS?" And it was the first time I'd really thought about it that way, and I was like, "Wait a second, yeah, why are we trying to fit what happens next into this box?" Because I've noticed it the past few days on the internet, people saying, "Well, what are the Power 5 which 5 conferences are the Power 5 now?" Like, there is no Power 5 anymore.
Yeah.
Like, after this, there's a Power 2, and then there's everybody else.
Are we headed to a place where bigger programs that are not in the Big Ten and the SEC currently, Clemson, Florida State, Oregon, USC,
North Carolina,
are they going to start looking at Notre Dame and say, you know what? Why are we propping up smaller programs when we can get on national TV? We can get on ESPN, we can get on Fox, we can get on whoever, we can get on Amazon. At what point are teams with that sort of reach and with that sort of brand recognition? Now, granted, Notre Dame is a bigger and more historic program than any of those other than USC, but at what point are people just going to take matters into their own hands? In the way that you look across the media landscape, and in media, reporters are going to Substack, are going to podcast. You know, people have the technology, they have the capability, they have the ability to sell, they have the ability to bundle. Doesn't that seem like, if bowls are becoming more and more ancient and antiquated in this modern college football world, on a certain level, aren't conferences, especially lesser conferences, starting to feel a little bit antiquated?
They are, but here's the thing: if you are those brands, your first move is not going to be let's form a newsletter on Substack.
Of course,
it's going to be let's call the SEC and see if they'll take us too, or let's call the Big Ten and see if they'll take us too.
Right.
And then, it's not really even a conference. Like, even at 16 teams, it barely feels like a conference. If you wanted to do divisions, you could actually have 2 different conferences, if you really wanted to. So if you go past 16, and look, if Clemson comes knocking on the door of the SEC, which obviously they can't do right now because there's a grant of rights in the ACC through 2036. But let's say things change. If they come knocking on the door of the SEC can be like, sure, come on in. We'll figure this out. We'll make room in our gated neighborhood for you.
Right.
Everybody else is going to have a little bit smaller lot, but we're all going to have McMansions.
What about micro conferences? If everybody's growing, why not bundle?
That's a good idea.
Oregon, USC, Washington, Stanford, or whatever, where you have a bigger piece and you have more flexibility and you maintain rivalries. Why is you can
I think that's a great zag. I think that would be phenomenal. And the thing is, you could do that without propping anybody up. Like, if you're USC, I think that would be a great idea. And USC, being a private school, isn't going to get any pressure from the legislature to take UCLA and Cal along with them if they don't want to. Right. They could keep UCLA as a rival if they wanted to. But I would agree. Like, on the West Coast, the three schools that I feel like, if I were a TV programmer, the ones that would matter to me are USC, Washington, and Oregon. Yep. Those are the ones that I would want. So I would say, forget everybody else, do your own thing, and make your own deal. You will make as much or more than you would have made before. But you have to have a good schedule.
You have to schedule up, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's where Notre Dame comes in. Notre Dame can be the best friend of all these micro conferences.
We finally get a solid verbal Notre Dame, Oregon. Yep.
Exactly. Because they can say we need, we have these spots left. You guys who are in with USC, you get the spots.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to it. Now, I understand why a team like Clemson would want SEC. But if you look, Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, Miami, bundling, it's fascinating. Yeah. It's a fascinating.
And Virginia, like throw Virginia Tech in there, and you got a really interesting league. Yeah. But yeah, that's the part. And I had somebody say this yesterday to me, and I hadn't really thought about it because it's never been a thing. Shedding, would any of these like the two biggies we keep talking about, would they shed from the bottom?
Right.
I don't think they will. I really just don't see that happening. But at some point in the other leagues, if you're just looking for a port in a storm, it would make more sense to have the ones that can command a good amount of money stop subsidizing the other ones.
And it's also tight. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, go ahead. No,
I'm all in on this zag. I love a good zag.
Please.
You, in the way that the NFL divisions, you have these cross-divisional matchups, right? Like the AFC North, one year we'll play the NFC West, and it'll go back and forth, home and home kind of thing the next season, stuff like that. I mean, it does make it an intriguing prospect. If like
you could think about this, Dan. You could make a deal with the SEC.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If you're a 3-team conference, a micro conference. You make a deal to be one pod's non-conference schedule.
Correct. And now you can weigh. So if you are weighing resumes, if the entirety of the Alabama, LSU, Auburn, whatever, Arkansas, Ole Miss pod, A&M pod, strikes this deal with a 4-team West Coast micro, whatever. All of a sudden you can say, well, Alabama and Auburn both played Oregon, and Alabama beat Oregon, but Auburn didn't. And all of a sudden you have these like common opponents that sort of further the competitive conversation nationally.
Yeah, it's the whole division plays the NFC West this year.
Yeah.
That whole thing. Yeah.
Ty, continue.
So we've got comments coming in across all the different platforms here where we're streaming this out. If you have questions, please do write in. We'll do our best to get to them here while we've got Andy. The one question I guess that we sort of panned over, how the hell did they keep a lid on this? This is a big deal. And supposedly they've been working on it for like 6 months, right?
It's longer than that. So it's been going on for a while. And I just, am learning exactly the extent of it as well. Because I'm not going to pretend I knew about it. Like nobody didn't know about it.
Nobody did
until Brent Zwerneman reported it. Yeah. And it was crazy. I was doing my mailbag column, and the call for questions goes out on Tuesday morning. So Tuesday night I'm sitting there, we write it to run on Thursday. So I usually write it on Wednesday. So it's Tuesday night. I'm sitting there picking questions, and my 11-year-old's hanging over my shoulder, reading the questions. And he reads this realignment question, and it's, is there any realignment on the horizon? And I look at him like, well, we're not. He's like, what about that one? I was like, no, we're not using this. And then unless Texas or Oklahoma wanted to go somewhere, nobody's moving anywhere. So, and then the next day it's just like, boom.
Yeah.
So
fun is pressure.
Now I think they're going to run into problems because they did keep it from Texas A&M.
Right.
And if I'm Texas A&M, I have, that's a legitimate gripe. You're legitimately mad. You thought you were going to be the only SEC program in the state of Texas. It's not going to stop anything. But I don't blame them for getting mad and yelling. I don't think it's going to. There's probably going to be a little lingering anger at the conference office level for A&M trying to pull the emergency brake there by leaking it. But I don't blame them for at least filing this under protest.
And they'll still cash the increased checks, to be clear.
Happily, yes. And also, this is a little side note. And I went on Texags radio today, and I tried to give a pep talk to the entire A&M fan base, because Texas people and Texas A&M people seem to have this idea of how it would be together, and that it would be like it used to be.
Right.
It will not be like it used to be. The dynamics are very different. It's sort of like, we'll use their own words. We'll use their phrasing, the big brother, little brother thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like the older brother's 22 and he's come home from college for the summer. And the younger brother's 18 and he's been seriously lifting weights. And he's got a girlfriend and, you know, he's got a job and you're like, oh crap, he's a man now. Like I can't push him around anymore. So that's what this is going to be. You know, Texas wouldn't be coming into a league where they can Bigfoot anyone. You know, it's one thing to pull that stuff in the Big 12, but when Alabama and Georgia and Auburn and LSU are sitting on the other side of the table, they're going to shut that down pretty quick. So it's not going to be the Texas is superior, Texas A&M is inferior. Like they don't need to look at it that way. And in fact, Texas A&M is quite superior on the football field. They've already built a roster built to compete in the SEC West.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have the best. They may, depending on how things get broken up, they may have the best roster in their pod when that happens. Texas would have a lot of ground to cover. So the dynamics of their relationship will be completely different than they used to be.
If Texas doesn't go to a 12-team playoff in the first 10 years of the playoff when it goes to 12, will it be considered a failure because it is from a competitive standpoint, or will it be considered a success from a financial and ego standpoint?
Well, I think everybody considers anything Texas does a failure if they're not winning at football.
Yeah.
I think the Texas people probably feel that way too.
Yep.
There's no excuse. You have all the resources. You should be able to succeed. So I think this would be the better move off the field.
Yeah.
But they will be viewed as a failure if they don't get successful again in football. Does being in the SEC give them a better chance to be successful? No. They have always had a chance. They have every chance in the world.
Kansas State not going to the SEC, and Texas
TCU
and Oklahoma
not
can't
going.
seem to solve the Wildcat problem in Manhattan.
Well, Texas really can't solve TCU. So
Right.
They'll be thrilled to be rid of Gary Patterson and his crew.
Yeah, it's amazing that these programs, and you know, maybe there's more of an allure because of the SEC and players wanting to play in the SEC, and maybe those rosters are better, but they're still dealing with the issues that have plagued them in Norman and Austin. And whether it's internally or on the field, we're still talking about two programs that were not necessarily bulletproof in a simpler conference, right?
Yeah. But that's not how you look at realignment.
Oh, for sure. But I'm saying from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there is no guarantee that anything gets any better. And in fact, it could be worse. Could be quite a bit worse if things go the wrong way. But that's never how a decision will get made in realignment.
All right. So we've got all sorts of comments here, guys.
We'll blast
Coming
through them
in.
and then we'll let Andy continue. I'm sure he's writing and
Yeah.
Coca-Cola Zero to drink. And
You need something a little stronger,
I hope
Andy.
you're being paid. Is that part of an NIL deal that you just flashed a Coke Zero? It can't be.
No. See, I needed to pull the Nick Saban and just have it like sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been sitting here for 3 years and it's probably spoiled.
I would have appreciated you pulling like a Wayne and Garth of like, it's really refreshing to see teams being aggressive, almost as refreshing.
Refreshing
as
as
a
this
Coke Zero.
Coca-Cola Zero sugar.
That's what I would have.
Like as I open the Pizza Hut box.
Yes.
Give
me some questions.
Here's the main question, and this is a good one. This is from our friend Dan, not you, Dan, but Dan on the Patreon. He says, this is undoubtedly good for the SEC. Is it good for college football? If 9 or 10 teams in a 12-team playoff come from the SEC footprint, is that beneficial for the overall health of the sport?
No. College football made all this money by going from being a regional sport to a national sport. This sucks it back into going back toward being a regional sport with everything concentrated in the South and in the Midwest. And look, those are the traditional places where college football was biggest. It's always been biggest in the South and the Midwest, but it's you would prefer it to be a national proposition. You would prefer people in California to feel like they have as much interest in the game as someone else, but I don't know that's going to get fixed. Now, Dan, I want to ask you this and Ty too, because you guys are part of this economy and the the way the media business has changed, where if you can build a loyal following, that is probably the best way to do it. That you can then strike out on your own. You can support yourself for a long time, as opposed to trying to hit, something in the monoculture,
right?
Where there really isn't a monoculture anymore. So is this just college football following the lead of the media business? There is no ABC, like ABC, CBS, NBC still exists, but let's be perfectly honest. A big TikToker gets a bigger audience than an ABC sitcom does now.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to the highly specialized, fragmented element of let's maximize the size of our tribe. Let's not necessarily worry about the good of everybody in our world. Let's figure out how to build the biggest possible audience of people who are most interested in us already. And for college football, again, like you mentioned, that's people in the Midwest and South. Now, our specific footprint ties on the East Coast, but he roots for teams that play in the Midwest-ish. Central PA is, I don't know what it's considered geographically, but of course he roots for Notre Dame. Right. He roots for Notre Dame, which is somewhere between the South and the Midwest, I guess. And I, of course, live in the Midwest, but I'm from the West Coast and root for a team on the West Coast. And there is an element of not feeling left behind, but like outside looking in at where the majority of the attention of the sport goes to. But at the same time, I sort of get the SEC and Big Ten looking out for itself. It is not the job of Kevin Warren and Greg Sankey to say, but what about Wazoo? It's not their job. They're maximizing their own product. And I think it further goes to the point of the national championship not being the point of the sport.
Well, that's your thing, and that's been your thing for a long time.
Like I think in a way you're right. It denationalizes the sport, but I think it also denationalizes the national championship, which I'm kind of okay with. The SEC race becomes more interesting to me.
Big Ten race, and also the question is, NIL may change this too, because I was talking to an athletic director the other day, and I said, "Do you know what I would love to see in your league? Formula One Drive to Survive with 4 of your teams, like where people actually say what they're thinking, and you publish that. Like the content you can create, the soap opera you can create around this 16-team SEC. I mean, like the happiest person on earth this week is Paul Feinbaum.
Sure.
He's good to go. I don't know how long the new contract he signed was, but every show's full for the entirety of that contract now, because you really can create your own universe around that league. And I'm curious, will the race for the SEC title be more interesting than the race for the national title?
Well, totally. It's a good point. And to your previous question, I mean, I'm glad you brought up NIL, because it could be that even though we just kind of have NIL now, it's been introduced to the world as of July 1st, and it's a thing, and people are getting $1 million and whatever else. It could be that college football, that business is sort of almost taking its own bit of NIL, right? Like everybody is kind of realizing their own value. Everybody is finding ways to maximize on that, to further their own brand, to grow their own footprint. And I don't know, I feel like in the past, there may have been more of a loyalty to the conference, to the traditions of the game. A lot of that seems to have fallen by the wayside over the years. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but there's definitely an aspect of that.
The people in charge, it's interesting. I want to talk to some of the people in charge who are a little bit older than me, because I feel like people my age and younger, there's no sentimentality toward the rules.
Exactly.
Right.
We always felt like the rules were just wrong and lopsided in favor of the people in charge. But there were a lot of true believers in the older generations who thought they were doing something noble by keeping money away from people, which I still, again, don't understand why you would think that, but they did. And I wonder if there's a level of cynicism from them, because that's the generation in charge of the sport right now, where they're like, we defended this for so long, and now it's just gone. So why should we care about any other traditions?
Exactly.
Agree. No, I mean, essentially what's almost assuredly going to happen is everybody's just going to try to build their own SEC and do lesser and lesser versions of the SEC. The Big Ten will do a slightly lesser version of the SEC, whoever they bring in.
Yeah, but I think the Big Ten should differentiate itself.
As
Because
do
I think it's the
but-
only one that can. Yeah.
But how?
Like, and
what are you doing?
if I'm Fox, I make the Godfather offer to say we want to be the exclusive home of the Big Ten with this next deal. Which, by the way, that deal starts getting negotiated by the end of this year.
Right. But
So,
what does
if
that
I'm
do?
Fox,
Why do I want to watch Michigan State, Indiana just because of an interesting media
Well,
deal?
I want to watch Tom Allen anytime, but that's
Sure.
just me.
Yeah.
So I just it's not quite the same thing, but kind of one's Fox News and one's MSNBC at that point.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of has their own.
Yeah, I don't know.
Does this make you happy as a college football fan, Andy?
I don't think it should. Makes me deliriously happy as a college football reporter.
Right.
Yeah.
But as a fan,
No, because for the same reason that we talked about earlier, I liked the idea of it being a national proposition. I liked the idea of sea to shining sea, everybody caring.
Yeah.
And because I grew up loving college football, and it was nice watching the rest of the country kind of wake up to it and like it as much as I did growing up in the South. And that was fun. It was really fun. And comparing traditions from everywhere else. And we do this over here, we do it like this over here. I thought that was a blast. And so the idea that someone in Seattle is going to feel like they're not part of this anymore, that's sad. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
But
There's-
I don't know what you do about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's an element, and just this maybe speaking for me, and it's just sort of piggybacking on what you said, where it's like conferences had identities. And I don't think the rules were great, but you talk about the SEC producing these crazy defenses. You talk about the Big 12 with wide open spread offenses. You talk about the Pac-12 or Pac-10 having golden boy quarterbacks from Orange County, and the Big 10 with, the tradition and 3 yards with a cloud of dust. And there's something lost. And again, the point of the sport is not charm, but I think the appeal of the sport for many people who started watching it and grew to appreciate the sport lies in that the ability to define geographically and through rivalries and through styles. And, even if you're a UCLA fan in 1998, you appreciate Peter Warwick. You appreciate the speed of Mickey Andrews defense. And at this point, there's a feeling to me of walking into a shopping center, and your options are Lowe's, Barnes and Noble, like Jersey Mike's, like just something.
I got a better one. Your
me.
option is Amazon.
Right. No, it's total Amazon, Google, Facebook. Yeah. I mean, and if you're talking about reflective of the society, that's where I think we go.
Yeah. I mean, we were joking on Twitter this morning about, I think Pete Thamel quoted some source as saying it's like a mall trying to figure out what to do when 2 anchor stores leave. And I said something like, the SEC's over here building the fancy outdoor mall and trying to figure out where to put the PF Chang's. And then Mark Passwaters, who covers A&M, goes, but Cheesecake Factory is really mad. Yeah, that's right. Cheesecake Factory is mad that they're adding PF Chang's and Maggiano's. Like that's that's where we're at.
All I'm gonna think about now is which conference is which big box restaurant, because a Big 12 AAC combo is Cheesecake Factory, right? Huge menu, nothing excellent.
We have the whole it's everything, every damn thing.
At best you're getting a B plus, but you're getting any.
So
style.
Is the SEC Buca de Beppo or Maggiano's, because it's all family style and it's all stick to your ribs.
Yeah,
right.
I mean it's a bulk option is Buca de Beppo, right? It's that huge pasta bulk.
If they organize in pods, it's definitely Buca.
Yeah.
That's your 4 family style dishes for 10 different people.
That's right.
And me, I ordered one of them for myself. but the rest of the table doesn't know that yet.
I think does this make Indiana? Oh man, I'm now trying to associate teams with chain restaurants and menu. Oh god, this is gonna drive.
Well,
the Big Ten, I think the Big Ten would want to be Tejas de Brazil, because don't they have one of those next to the conference office? Or what's the other big churrascaria
Fogo de
chain?
Chao.
Fogo de Chao. They've got a Fogo de Chao right next to the conference office, but I don't know that they get to be Fogo de Chao because, well, you could do that. You could make a league Fogo de Chao, and so Ohio State is, oh, would you like some filet mignon, sir?
Yes.
And then Penn State is, would you like some bacon wrapped shrimp, sir?
Mhm.
And then you get down to, would you like some grilled chicken breast, sir? Like that's Rutgers.
Rutgers is the breadbasket. Yeah.
No. The Rutgers is not good enough to be those little rolls at the churrascaria.
Rutgers is
That-
the paper
see,
towel
that's
dispenser.
like-
yeah.
Indiana or Iowa or Minnesota in a good year. That's
Yeah.
what those are.
Okay, so Rutgers is the towel dispenser, just there to clean up.
Rutgers is the actual salad on the salad bar that
Yeah.
never gets touched.
Ignored, but you kind of have to have it there for unclear reasons. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. There's definitely a bummer element to this, but I think it's fascinating for people like us to see how the sport will be reorganized and rethought of. But we're entering into an era of people being left behind because they don't have enough alumni. They're not in a big enough city. They have not won enough. They haven't put together enough 10-win seasons, which I don't think has ever fully been the point of the sport.
Yeah, and if you're a team like Oklahoma's won, 6 straight titles now, and they're going to go to a tougher conference. So,
I appreciate that. I appreciate Iron Shake.
They want the challenge, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. If that were the reason
more.
why, I would appreciate it more. But that's not the reason.
Yeah, we're not shying away. That's fine.
Yeah,
I'm good with it. All right. I mean, we're all guessing. I mean, except for the Fogo de Chao stuff. That is certain, and
That's real.
that is ironclad. Andy Staples, listen to the Andy Staples show. If you are watching this or listening to this thereafter, listening to the Andy Staples show is always a good idea. He has all sorts of
every aspect of the show at one point has been stolen from the Solid Verbal. So
yeah.
you'll feel right at home.
We are the Larry Sanders show of modern college football podcasting. But no, it's a fantastic show, and you should listen to Andy's great and attacks the sport in, I think, a fun, different way than a lot of people. So any parting words, Ty? Any parting words, Andy?
I mean, I'll defer to Andy here since he's our guest of honor, but I hope there is reporting, and my guess is that from some of your comments earlier, you're already looking into what the extent of the planning was behind this, because I think we'll
get to the bottom of it.
I think that will be the really interesting, fine print behind all of this, because we all gravitate towards the headlines, and conferences are going to break apart. Some folks are going to make more money. Some folks are going to get left behind. Where does Baylor go? Like all these things that I think everybody views it through their own lens. But at least from our standpoint, I'm just incredibly curious how the hell this happened, and no one found out about it until 3 days ago.
It's amazing. And here's the other next logical question that I'll leave you with. All of the planning of the 12-team playoff happened concurrently.
That's true. In secret.
And yeah. Meanwhile, 2 of the people who are either involved or greatly affected were 2 of the people creating the playoff too. I mean, there's so much. I mean, there's a Netflix series in this.
We need Jack Bauer to find the mole is what we need.
Yeah. Or
Exactly.
Shams. Or Shams Serinia. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh man. No, it's fascinating. And the way the sport operates, I understand why it does the things it does, but the fascinating back room element to this is gonna be a great read or watch or whatever. And Drive to Survive college football. I'm in. I am such a huge fan.
Push.
Oh my God. Gene and oh God, if Haas enters the fray and starts a conference, it's gonna be terrible. Yeah, the secret, Ty, you haven't watched this F1.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I know what Formula One is. But...
All I know is Oklahoma's football complex looks like McLaren headquarters.
Oh, yeah. A lot of glass. There's so much money in this sport. But it's basically, I don't know who the college football analog would be, but there are 2.5 actual good F1 teams, but everybody's spending $300 million a year. And they all have these
You don't know who the college football analogs for that would be? I think we've got a pretty good idea.
No, that's true. Go Blue. So they all spend a ton of money. There's only 2 or 3 good teams. And the teams at the bottom, like there's 2 or 3 teams at the bottom of F1, and they just have no idea why they're bad. They're like, oh no, we have 4 wheels. It seems to be going like, and it's
yeah.
shout out to Williams.
We dumped $200 million into this freaking car, but we still get smoked
they have
every
no
time.
idea. There was one team that didn't have all of the parts ready for the beginning of the season and had to fly with like additional brake pads to the testing. Like, it's such a mess. And I guess Washington State couldn't send their coach to media days. So I don't know. Maybe Wazoo is somewhere in there. But here we are. I would love some sort of, and that's the appeal, right? That's how you get people that, okay, maybe Cal, maybe Arizona State, maybe they're not performing on the field, but like they'll make you a star somehow. I don't know.
It was a brave new world.
Yeah. All right. That's all I have.
Again.
Andy Staples from The Athletic. Check out the Andy Staples Show. We appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, especially on a day like today. So thanks for hopping on here for this Emerge stream, whatever we want to call it, talking about
pleasure.
Conference realignment, part 2, part whatever.
Yeah. What's for dinner, by the way?
I don't know. That's a great question. We're bachelor. We look like a college sophomore's fridge right now. We're trying not to overspend at the grocery store, but we still don't want to eat out too much. So I do have to figure that out. But I have a feeling it's going to be tacos, especially if something else breaks that I have to write about. It's definitely tacos at that point.
Easy, done, simple. Ty, are you having something better or worse?
Tacos are sounding pretty good right now, actually.
Yeah, I think we'll make it 3 for 3. Tacos sound wonderful tonight.
Yeah.
All right, Andy, thank you very much for your time. Everybody listen to the Andy Staples Show. Read him at The Athletic. We'll talk soon.
See you guys.